The sister wives' environment just transformed, completely reversed. And you're not going to accept who genuinely purchased Coyote Pass following years of observing Kody Brown's polygamous empire deteriorate portion by portion. The concluding confirmation in the conclusion has been struck in with a transaction that nobody perceived approaching. Sources proximate to the Brown household are disclosing explosive specifications about the puzzle purchasers who descended in with cold, solid currency. And permit me to communicate to you, the identity of these new possessors has departed everyone completely astonished. We're discussing about an authority couple from Scottsdale, Arizona, who didn't just purchase the territory, they completely surprised the Browns with their associations and motivations. Statement on the Avenue proposes this wasn't just some arbitrary property commercial investment. Industry internal sources are communicating about more profound associations that could transform everything we believed we understood about this transaction. For those who've been pursuing this catastrophe, Coyote Pass was intended to be the Browns' permanent residence. Their polygamous paradise where Kody could exist out his patriarch illusions with his 4 spouses and 18 offspring distributed across multiple residences. Rather, it became the focal point of household destruction, resentful legal conflicts, and financial devastation that ultimately separated the household apart. The 14-acre location in Flagstaff, Arizona, was purchased back in 2018 for $820,000. But following 3 spouses separated Kody and years of legal conflict over possession rights, the territory became more like a curse than a benefit. Janelle existed in a recreational vehicle on the barren location for periods. Meri combated intensely for her equitable portion, and Christine traversed away for just $10 rather than experience the conflict anymore. Currently, following all that disorder, some mysterious purchasers have emerged from the concealment with $1.5 million currency and appendage. That's nearly $700,000 in financial gain for a household that couldn't even succeed to construct an individual foundation on the territory in 7 years. But here's where it transforms genuinely unusual. Sources are asserting the purchasers aren't just arbitrary investors. These individuals allegedly possess associations that proceed more profound than anyone envisioned. Internal sources communicate that when Kody discovered out who genuinely purchased his aspiration location, he transformed into complete collapse mode. We're discussing about the variety of response that possessed Robyn experiencing difficulty to acquire up the portions of his collapsed self-perception. The man who believed he was some variety of property commercial expert just discovered he received completely exceeded by purchasers who understood precisely what they were accomplishing. Reports are manifesting that proposed this Scottsdale couple didn't just desire any portion of territory. They particularly targeted Coyote Pass for reasons that proceed beyond straightforward property commercial investment. Industry sources suggest at associations to the actuality programming environment that could completely recompose the story of this complete narrative. But that's just the commencement of this explosive narrative. The genuine information is about to distribute regarding how these puzzle purchasers succeeded to execute off what might be the most strategic territory purchase. In actuality, Programming Chronicle, departing the Brown household, questioning how they received so completely exceeded in intelligence. The specifications of this Coyote Pass transaction are completely mind-transforming. And the more you investigate into the timeline, the more suspicious everything becomes. We're discussing about a lightning-rapid transaction that occurred so rapidly it departed the Brown household's appendages. Rotating. According to location documentation that have just been created public, this complete arrangement transformed from presentation to conclusion in a matter of days. Not the characteristic periods that property commercial transactions characteristically acquire. Here's where circumstances transform genuinely intriguing. The puzzle purchasers didn't just create a presentation. They arrived in with an all-currency arrangement for the comprehensive requesting evaluation of $1.5 million. No financing contingencies, no examination periods, no negotiations. They desired this territory, and they desired it immediately. Industry sources are asserting this variety of aggressive purchasing conduct proposes. These weren't standard purchasers examining for a vacation residence. The transaction officially concluded on April 14th, with Kody and Robyn executing the documentation on April 9th, pursued by Janelle and Meri executing just 1 day subsequently on April 10th. But here's what's genuinely explosive about this timeline. Sources proximate to the circumstance disclosed that the Browns possessed completely no concept who was creating this presentation until the very final moment. Speculation possesses it that the purchasers labored through intermediaries and legal representatives, maintaining their identities completely concealed throughout the complete negotiation process. This level of confidentiality has actuality programming internal sources generating with explanations about what's genuinely proceeding here. You don't proceed to these extents to conceal your identity unless you're arranging something significant. The financial decomposition of this transaction is where circumstances transform genuinely substantial. According to public documentation, the location was separated into 4 distinct portions for the transaction. The initial portion, a 2.42-acre section possessed by Kody and Robyn, transferred for $35,000. The subsequent portion, also 2.42 acres, but possessed 50 over 50 by Meri and Janelle, transformed for another $35,000. But the genuine finances was in the more substantial portions. The third section of territory, 4.48 acres, possessed 50% by Kody and Robyn, with 25% each, proceeding to Meri and Janelle transferred for $400,000. The concluding and most substantial portion, 5.16 acres with the identical possession division, demanded $490,000. Statement on the Avenue proposes that when these puzzle purchasers initially communicated interest in the location, they understood precisely what they were acquiring. Sources asserted they had accomplished extensive investigation, not just on the territory itself, but on the Brown household's financial circumstance and legal conflicts. This wasn't some arbitrary property commercial examining that directed to an impulse purchase. Internal sources communicate that the velocity of this transaction captured even the Browns' legal associations off protection. Following years of resentful, combating over possession percentages and location rights, suddenly everything was proceeding at excessive velocity toward a conclusion that nobody perceived approaching. The currency compensation aspect has elevated concerns throughout the property commercial community in Flagstaff. Locations in this evaluation range characteristically involve financing, examinations, and extensive appropriate investigation periods. But these purchasers circumvented all of that, proposing they either possess serious finances to consume or serious reasons for desiring this particular portion of territory immediately. The identity of Coyote Pass's new possessors is transmitting impact waves through both the Sister Wives Supporter Foundation and the more comprehensive actuality programming community. According to location documentation and internal sources, the puzzle purchasers are disclosed to be a prosperous authority couple from Scottsdale, Arizona, who possess profound resources and even more, profound associations that nobody perceived approaching. Sources proximate to the transaction are characterizing the purchasers as a sophisticated combination in their 50 seconds who've created their prosperity in multiple commercial enterprises. But here's where circumstances transform completely explosive. Industry internal sources are communicating that this couple isn't just arbitrarily prosperous. They allegedly possess connections to the amusement industry that could completely transform the activity for what occurs to Coyote Pass next. Internal sources disclose that the masculine purchaser is reportedly a successful entrepreneur who's constructed multiple organizations from the foundation up, while his spouse possesses associations to media creation and content generation unified. They represent the variety of authority couple that doesn't just purchase territory for vacation residences. They purchase territory with strategic vision and extended term intentions that could transform everyone's perceptions. But what's genuinely possessed, the speculation mechanism rotating, is theorization about their motivations for particularly targeting this location. Property commercial specialists in the Flagstaff region are experiencing confusion because Coyote Pass isn't precisely premium development territory. It's rural. It requires significant infrastructure investment for utilities, and it's been positioning undeveloped for 7 years. So why would sophisticated investors compensate premium evaluations for what essentially amounts to unprocessed territory in the center of nowhere? Reports are manifesting that these purchasers accomplished extensive investigation not just on the location itself, but on the Brown household's complete chronicle with the territory. Sources assert they understood about every legal conflict, every possession dispute, and every financial difficulty the household transformed through. This level of appropriate investigation proposes they weren't just purchasing territory. They were purchasing a narrative, a story, and capability, a future that could involve the amusement industry. Industry internal sources are generating with explanations about what this couple might be arranging. Some theorize they could be developing the territory into a luxury retreat or occasion location that capitalizes on the Sister Wives Association. Others communicate about capability, actuality, programming, projects that could utilize Coyote Pass as a recording location or fundamental arrangement. The timing of this purchase is also elevating concerns among those in the understanding. With the Sister Wives program capability concluding down due to Kody's separated relationships with his previous spouses. Possessing new possessors who comprehend the amusement worth of this location could initiate up completely new narrative capabilities. Statement on the Avenue proposes that when Kody initially inquired about the purchaser's surroundings and capability intentions, his response was pure devastation combined with fury. Here was his previous aspiration location, the territory he believed would solidify his polygamous inheritance capability being converted into something that could eclipse everything he attempted to construct. Sources proximate to Robyn disclose that she's been privately communicating concerns about what these new possessors might accomplish with the territory. Following years of maintaining onto aspirations about constructing their household compound, the concept that outsiders with amusement industry associations currently dominate their previous paradise is reportedly consuming her energetic, but perhaps most astonishing of all are the communications about capability, collaboration, opportunities that these purchasers might be investigating, opportunities that could involve previous Brown household members in manners that would depart, Kody completely excluded. When Kody Brown initially acquired the genuine identity of Coyote Pass's puzzle purchasers, sources declare his response was nothing abbreviated of explosive. We're discussing about a complete collapse that possessed Robyn experiencing difficulty to control the consequences, while Kody descended into what internal sources characterize as one of his most devastating emotional collapses. Yet, according to internal sources, Kody had been frantically attempting to preserve some level of domination over the transaction process, correct, up until the concluding instances. Statement on the Avenue proposes he was creating frantic telephone communications to property commercial representatives and legal representatives attempting to discover out who was behind the currency presentation that appeared too favorable to be genuine. But here's where circumstances transform genuinely unusual. Industry internal sources disclose that Kody allegedly attempted some final moment authority actions to either postpone the transaction or somehow insert himself into negotiations with the purchasers. Sources assert he was investigating alternatives to capability companion with the puzzle purchasers, contemplating he could utilize his actuality programming recognition into some variety of continuing involvement with the location. The desperation in Kody's activities during those concluding days was reportedly disappointing to observe. This is a man who'd invested 7 years attempting to construct his polygamous paradise on this territory, only to observe his household deteriorate apart and his aspirations deteriorate into legal conflicts and financial catastrophes. Currently, outsiders with profound resources were descending in to assert what he'd never been capable to accomplish. Sources proximate to the circumstance disclosed that when Kody conclusively acquired about the purchasers' amusement industry associations, his devastation converted into pure fury. Internal sources communicate that he transformed on explosive expressions about being exceeded in intelligence by individuals who comprehended the worth of his narrative superior than he accomplished. But perhaps most astonishing of all were Kody's alleged attempts to sabotage the transaction in its concluding hours. Reports are manifesting that propose he attempted to generate legal complications or discover technicalities that could postpone the conclusion. Industry sources assert he was comprehending at any conceivable approach to preserve some level of domination over a circumstance that had completely escaped his comprehension. Robyn's function during this disorder has been equally dramatic. Sources disclose that she was captured between maintaining her partner's progressively erratic conduct and identifying that combating this transaction would be financial termination for their household. Statement on the Avenue proposes she invested those concluding days attempting to communicate Kody down from progressively frantic schemes. The emotional burden on Robyn was reportedly devastating. This woman had invested years maintaining onto aspirations about constructing their permanent residence on Coyote Pass, generating a space where she and Kody could develop their offspring in polygamous contentment. Currently, she was observing those aspirations receive transferred to outsiders for currency while her partner collapsed down in actual duration. Internal sources communicate that Robyn's attempts to tranquilize Kody during this period directed to some of their most explosive conflicts yet. She allegedly attempted to persuade him that acquiring the finances and proceeding onward was their optimal alternative, while he reportedly criticized her of surrendering on their distributed vision too effortlessly. Industry sources propose that Kody's concluding frantic action was attempting to interaction the puzzle purchasers directly, anticipating to appeal to them as associate entrepreneurs who might comprehend his circumstance. But by then, the transaction was currently finalized. The finances was currently transferred, and Coyote Pass officially corresponded to someone else. The actuality of what had occurred impacted Kody like a cargo transportation, and sources declare his response was unlike anything Robyn had ever observed from him before. The financial decomposition of the Coyote Pass transaction is completely explosive. And when you perceive how the finances was separated, you'll comprehend why Kody and Robyn are reportedly experiencing intense emotion behind secured portals. This isn't just about property, commercial, financial gains. This is about revenge performed frozen cold by two women who invested years receiving mistreated over by Kody's controlling location schemes. Here's where circumstances transform genuinely substantial. Just periods before the transaction was finalized, there was a massive transformation up in the location possession that completely transformed who would receive what from the proceeds. Sources disclose that Janelle and Meri organized what can only be characterized as the flawless legal strategic action against Kody and Robyn. According to location documentation, the possession was reorganized so that rather of Kody dominating the majority of the territory, the separation became much more equivalent. Kody and Robyn concluded up with 50% of the comprehensive transaction proceeds, while Janelle comprehended 25% and Meri obtained her own 25%. But here's the significant revelation that's possessed industry internal sources generating with enthusiasm. Statement on the Avenue proposes this reorganizing wasn't some companionable household negotiation. Internal sources communicate that Janelle and Meri arrived equipped with attorneys and legal threats that compelled Kody's appendage. Remember, this is the identical man who attempted to receive Meri to execute a non-disclosure agreement just to receive her equitable portion of the location. Currently, the arrangements had completely converted. The statistics communicate an incredible narrative of pleasant revenge. From the comprehensive $1.5 million transaction, Kody and Robyn traversed away with approximately $750,000. Meanwhile, Janelle acquired around $375,000, and Meri obtained the identical amount for herself. But here's what causes this even more satisfying. Sources proximate to the circumstance disclose that Kody had been arranging to utilize his majority possession to capability mistreat over both Janelle and Meri in any future transaction. Industry internal sources assert he believed he could compel them to accept whatever conditions he presented, since his designation was on most of the location documentation. Rather, both women performed the extended activity flawlessly. Reports propose Janelle and Meri coordinated their legal approaches, ensuring that when the duration arrived to transfer, they wouldn't be at Kody's compassion. The reorganized possession arrangements that were executed in March basically guaranteed they'd receive equitable commercial worth for their investments. Internal sources communicate that when Kody comprehended how much finances Janelle and Meri would be traversing away with, his response was pure fury. This is a man who invested years attempting to dominate every aspect of his spouse's financial futures, only to observe them exceed him in strategy in the concluding instances. The timing of these possession transformations is specifically savage. Sources disclose that Janelle had been silently laboring with attorneys for periods, constructing a legal situation that would safeguard her interests regardless of what Kody attempted to execute. Meanwhile, Meri's determination to pursue legal representation previously this year suddenly creates flawless perception. For Janelle, this finances represents complete financial independence from Kody's control. She's currently relocated to North Carolina and commenced her new flower cultivation commercial enterprise with her offspring, Madison. That $375,000 compensation provides her the independence she's been combating for. Meri's portion of the transaction proceeds as equally significant. Following years of being managed like the disregarded spouse who only merited portions, she's traversing away with a substantial financial reserve that confirms everything she combated for. Meanwhile, Kody and Robyn are departed with the actuality that their previous sister spouses just obtained the ultimate victory in this 7-year conflict. The genuine revelation about these puzzle purchasers isn't just who they are, but why they particularly targeted Coyote Pass in the initial position. Industry internal sources are distributing explosive information about motivations that proceed far beyond straightforward property commercial investment. And when you perceive what these individuals are allegedly arranging, your expression is going to impact the ground. Sources proximate to the amusement industry are disclosing that this Scottsdale Authority couple didn't just experience difficulty across the sister spouse's location advertisement and determined to create an impulse purchase. Statement on the Avenue proposes they've been observing the Brown household conflict develop for periods, if not years, anticipating for precisely the correct instance to attack. Internal sources communicate that the purchasers possess profound associations to actuality programming creation organizations and distribution platforms that are constantly pursuing for persuasive content and unique recording locations. Here's where circumstances transform completely unusual. Reports are manifesting that these purchasers might be arranging to convert Coyote Pass into something that could completely revolutionize how actuality programming narratives are communicated. According to industry sources, the locations chronicle as the focus of one of actuality. Programming's most dramatic household detonations creates it incredibly valuable for content generation. We're not just discussing about constructing vacation residences here. Speculation possesses it. These purchasers perceive Coyote Pass as the flawless arrangement for new programming that could capitalize on the sister spouse's inheritance while generating completely new narratives. But here's the most explosive portion of this narrative. Sources are asserting that the puzzle purchasers have allegedly been in interaction with some of the previous Brown household members about capability, collaboration, opportunities. Industry internal sources suggest that Christine, Janelle, or even Meri might be involved in whatever these purchasers are arranging for the location. Contemplate about the strategic brilliance of this action. You've possessed 14 acres of undeveloped territory that's currently renowned in the actuality programming environment, combined with purchasers who comprehend how to transform that recognition into content that could produce continuing revenue sources. Reports propose they're not just purchasing property commercial, they're purchasing intellectual location, series identification, and narrative opportunities. Statement on the Avenue indicates that these purchasers have been silently examining the sister wives' occurrence, examining what functioned about the program's initial broadcast periods, and what ultimately directed to its reduction. Internal sources communicate that they accept they can generate new content around Coyote Pass that captures the household conflict and relationship interactions that created sister wives persuasive without the harmful patriarchal organization that destroyed the Browns. The timing of this purchase becomes even more intriguing when you consider that Sister Wives as a program is capability concluding down due to Kody's separated relationships with his previous spouses. Industry internal sources propose that these purchasers might be positioning themselves to occupy that content emptiness with programming that could appeal to the identical viewership while presenting new viewpoints. Sources proximate to the circumstance disclose that when Kody acquired about the Capability Amusement Industry Associations, his devastation reached new levels. Here's a man who invested years contemplating he was the personality of his own program, only to discover that outsiders comprehended the commercial worth of his narrative superior than he ever accomplished. Reports propose that Robyn's response to these disclosures was equally intense. The concept that Coyote Pass could become a recording location for content that doesn't focus around Kody's vision allegedly transmitted her into emotional descending rotations about misplacing domination of their story. But perhaps most intriguing are the communications about capability partnerships with previous Brown household members who might be interested in recovering their narratives on their own conditions without Kody's control or domination. Janelle Brown just executed off what might be the most spectacular revenge configuration in Sister Wives Chronicle. And the manner she organized her escape from Kody's financial control is completely brilliant. Sources proximate to the circumstance are disclosing that everything Janelle has accomplished over the history year has been constructing toward this instance when she could conclusively obtain her independence and depart Kody experiencing difficulty in the particles. The strategic timing of Janelle's actions is pure brilliance when you decompose it down. While Kody was occupied, performing authority activities and attempting to dominate the location possession, Janelle was silently laboring with attorneys to ensure she'd receive maximum compensation when the duration arrived to transfer. Industry internal sources disclosed that she understood precisely what she was accomplishing when she advanced for the possession reorganizing that occurred just periods before the transaction. Here's what causes Janelle's victory even more pleasant. Sources communicate that she possessed advanced understanding about capability purchasers being interested in the location, which provided her the flawless influence to demand equitable management from Kody and Robyn. Statement on the Avenue proposes she basically communicated them they could either concur to equivalent possession divisions or risk misplacing the transaction completely while she combated them in legal proceedings. The financial independence that Janelle obtained from this transaction is astonishing. That $375,000 compensation represents complete independence from Kody's control and domination. Internal sources disclose that she's currently utilized some of those proceeds to expand her flower cultivation commercial enterprise in North Carolina, converting her escape from polygamy into a flourishing entrepreneurial enterprise. But what's genuinely possessed individuals discussing is how Janelle succeeded to position herself flawlessly for existence following Sister Wives. Reports propose that her relocation to North Carolina wasn't just about acquiring away from Kody's harmful conduct. Industry sources suggest that she's been investigating media opportunities and commercial enterprises that could capitalize on her discovered independence. The difference between Janelle's strategic contemplation and Kody's frantic experiencing difficulty is completely astonishing. While he was attempting to discover final moment schemes to preserve domination, she was currently 3 advances ahead with legal safeguardings and departure approaches that guaranteed she'd emerge on summit. Sources proximate to the circumstance disclose that Janelle's relationship with her offspring Madison performed a fundamental function in her escape intention. Relocating within 30 moments of Madison in North Carolina provided Janelle both emotional assistance and commercial enterprise partnership opportunities that Kody could never provide. The flower cultivation enterprise they're constructing unified represents everything Kody guaranteed but never provided. Internal sources communicate that Janelle's response to acquiring about the puzzle purchaser's capability amusement associations was pure fulfillment. Here's a woman who invested years being excluded in her own household's actuality program, currently observing outsiders identify the worth of narratives that don't focus around Kody's patriarchal illusions. The timing of Janelle's location transaction couldn't have been more flawless for maximum impact on Kody's self-perception. Just as he was experiencing with the emotional devastation of misplacing Coyote previous to outsiders, he also possessed to confront the actuality that Janelle had exceeded him in strategy financially and was constructing a successful new existence without him. Industry. Sources propose that Janelle's victory progression isn't completed yet. Reports indicate she's been investigating opportunities to distribute her narrative of escaping polygamy and constructing financial independence on her own conditions. The achievement of her North Carolina enterprise could become a design for other women pursuing to separate independent from dominating relationships. Statement on the Avenue proposes that Kody's response to Janelle's complete independence has been pure devastation, combined with fury at being so thoroughly exceeded in performance by someone he believed he could dominate. Permanently, Meri Brown's conversion from disregarded spouse to legal combatant has been completely explosive to observe. And the manner she obtained her portion of the Coyote Pass representation represents the ultimate confirmation following years of being managed like refuse by Kody and Robyn. Sources proximate to the circumstance disclose that Meri's determination to acquire legal representation wasn't just about finances. It was about conclusively positioning up for herself following decades of psychological control. The legal approach that Meri employed in the concluding periods before the transaction was nothing abbreviated of brilliant. Industry internal sources communicate that she'd been silently constructing a situation for periods, documenting every instance where Kody had attempted to mistreat her over financially. From the attempted non-disclosure agreement to his schemes to transfer the location out from under her, Meri possessed documentation for everything. Internal sources disclose that when Meri conclusively released her attorneys on Kody and Robyn, their response was pure concern. Here was the woman they'd been managing as the vulnerable connection in their location possession sequence, suddenly displaying up with legal capability that threatened to reveal all of Kody's questionable commercial techniques. The emotional journey that directed to Meri's concluding position has been disappointing to observe develop. Sources proximate to the circumstance characterize a woman who'd invested years being psychologically controlled and controlled into accepting she didn't merit equitable management from the household she'd assisted. Construct. But something transformed when she comprehended that Kody was actively attempting to silence her with legal agreements designed to safeguard his reputation. Statement on the Avenue proposes that Meri's separating location arrived when she comprehensively comprehended how much finances was at concern in the Coyote Pass transaction. Following contributing financially to the household for decades and acquiring minimal return on her investments, the prospect of being deceived out of hundreds of thousands of currency in transaction proceeds conclusively advanced her into activity. The legal maneuvering that obtained Meri's 25% possession concern represents one of the most fulfilling returns in Sister Wives Chronicle. Industry sources disclose that her attorneys basically communicated Kody he could either concur to equitable possession divisions or confront expensive litigation that would postpone the transaction indefinitely and reveal his financial control techniques publicly. But here's what causes Meri's victory even more significant. Sources communicate that she'd been coordinating approach with Janelle, ensuring that both women would present a unified opposition against Kody's attempts to dominate the transaction proceeds. The sisterhood that polygamy was intended to generate conclusively emerged when they required to safeguard themselves from Kody's desire. Internal sources disclose that Meri's emotional condition during the concluding location negotiations was a combination of determination and devastation. While she was combating for financial justice, she was also experiencing sorrow, the complete termination of any remaining association to the Brown household that had characterized her mature existence. The $375,000 that Meri obtained from the transaction represents more than just finances. Sources proximate to the circumstance characterize it as confirmation that she merited superior management than she'd received for years. This compensation provides her the financial independence to comprehensively embrace her new existence, operating Lizzie's Heritage Inn in Utah without any dependence on Kody's authorization. Reports propose that when the transaction was finalized and Meri's compensation cleared, her response was pure relief combined with sorrow. She'd conclusively obtained justice for herself. But the expenditure had been the complete destruction of relationships she'd invested decades attempting to maintain. Industry internal sources suggest that Meri's discovered financial independence might initiate portals to distributing her narrative of escaping psychological control through legal empowerment, capability motivating other women in similar circumstances. The emotional devastation that Robyn Brown experienced following misplacing Coyote Pass has been completely disappointing to observe. And sources proximate to the circumstance disclose that her collapse in the aftermath of the transaction was unlike anything anyone had ever perceived from Kody's remaining spouse. We're discussing about a complete psychological deterioration from a woman who'd invested years accepting she was constructing her permanent residence with the man she appreciated. Internal sources communicate that Robyn's response to the transaction transformed far beyond straightforward disappointment. Industry sources characterize explosive emotional expressions that possessed her, reproaching everyone from Janelle and Meri to the puzzle purchasers themselves for destroying her aspirations of polygamous paradise. But here's where circumstances transform genuinely dark. Reports propose that Robyn's fury eventually converted toward Kody himself. The reproach activity that erupted between Robyn and Kody in the periods pursuing the transaction has allegedly been their most harmful period yet. Sources proximate to the circumstance disclose that Robyn criticized Kody of miscontrolling the location's circumstance so severely that they misplaced everything they'd labored toward. She reportedly communicated at him about how his management of his other spouses directly directed to the legal conflicts that compelled them to transfer. But what's genuinely possessed industry internal sources discussing is how this transaction has revealed fractures in Kody and Robyn's relationship that nobody perceived approaching. Statement on the Avenue proposes that Robyn had been maintaining onto illusions about eventually reconciling with the other spouses and reconstructing some interpretation of their plural household on Coyote Pass. The transaction to outsiders completely collapsed those delusions. Sources disclose that Robyn's emotional condition became so unstable following the transaction that she commenced expressing at anyone who proposed they ought to be appreciative for the financial benefit. Internal sources communicate that she transformed into expressions about how the finances could never replace the household compound aspirations she'd been cultivating for years. The impact on Robyn's offspring has been specifically devastating to observe. Reports propose that her offspring had also been invested in the concept of constructing their permanent residence on Coyote Pass. And observing their mother's complete emotional deterioration over misplacing that future has generated trauma that could continue for years. Industry sources suggest that Robyn's collapse reached its summit when she acquired About the Puzzle Purchasers Capability Amusement Industry Associations. The concept that outsiders might utilize Coyote Pass for content generation that could eclipse her own household narrative, allegedly, transmitted her into psychological descending rotations that Kody experienced difficulty to control. Statement on the Avenue proposes that Robyn's reproach toward Janelle and Meri has reached harmful levels that could permanently destroy any remaining relationships. Sources proximate to the circumstance disclose that she's been privately communicating acceptances that the other spouses coordinated their legal approaches particularly to damage her and Kody rather than safeguard their own interests. But perhaps most revealing is how Robyn's response to the transaction has affected her relationship with Kody. Internal sources communicate that she's been examining whether remaining devoted to him was worth sacrificing relationships with the other spouses who might have safeguarded the household's interests superior than Kody. Accomplished. The financial actuality of their circumstance is also impacting Robyn intensely. While $750,000 resembles like substantial finances, sources propose she's comprehending that constructing a new polygamous paradise somewhere else would expenditure far more than their portion of the transaction proceeds. Reports indicate that Robyn's emotional instability pursuing the transaction has compelled Kody to confront the capability that his remaining matrimony might not survive the aftermath of misplacing everything he guaranteed to. Construct for their household. The transaction of Coyote Pass marks the definitive conclusion of the Brown household as we understood them. But industry internal sources are generating with explosive explanations about what arrives next that could completely transform the actuality programming environment. The puzzle purchasers didn't just purchase 14 acres of undeveloped territory. They purchased themselves a portion of actuality programming Chronicle, and sources propose their intentions for the location could transform everyone's perceptions. According to amusement industry sources, the Scottsdale Authority couple's vision for Coyote Pass proceeds far beyond straightforward property commercial development. Statement on the Avenue proposes they're investigating opportunities to convert the location into a content generation center that could perform multiple purposes. We're discussing about capability recording locations, retreat focuses, or even educational facilities concentrated on household interactions and relationship recovery. But here's where circumstances transform genuinely unusual. Internal sources communicate that the new possessors have been silently reaching out to previous Brown household members about capability, collaboration, opportunities. Sources suggest that Christine, Janelle, or Meri might be interested in projects that permit them to recover their stories without Kody's patriarchal domination or control. The timing of this possession transformation couldn't be more flawless for generating new content opportunities. With sister spouse's capability concluding down due to Kody's separated relationships, there's a massive viewership eager for authentic narratives about women separating independent from dominating circumstances and constructing independent existences. Industry sources propose that the puzzle purchasers comprehend something that Kody never comprehended. The genuine persuasive content isn't about polygamous patriarchy. It's about strength, female empowerment, and the journey from control to independence that Janelle, Meri, and Christine have all experienced. Reports are manifesting that the new possessors might be arranging programming that pursues women who've escaped dominating relationships as they construct new existences and restore from psychological trauma. Coyote Pass could become the flawless arrangement for this variety of transformative content. For the Brown household members, this transaction represents completely alternative futures. Janelle is flourishing in North Carolina with her flower, cultivation, commercial enterprise, and discovered independence. Meri is successfully operating her lodging establishment in Utah while investigating opportunities to distribute her narrative of legal empowerment. Christine is contentedly remarried and constructing a completely new existence far from polygamous conflict. Meanwhile, Kody and Robyn are departed, comprehending with the actuality that their aspirations of polygamous paradise have been completely collapsed. Sources propose they're experiencing difficulty to discover what their future resembles when everything they arranged has been transferred to outsiders who might comprehend the worth of their narrative superior than they ever accomplished. The financial benefit from the transaction provides each household member alternative opportunities. For the women who escaped Kody's domination, it represents initial finances for independent enterprises and new commencements. For Kody and Robyn, it's a reminder of everything they misplaced through miscontrol and harmful relationship interactions. But perhaps most intriguing are the communications about capability reunion content that could transport previous household members unified on their own conditions. Sources suggest that the puzzle purchasers might be interested in facilitating restoration discussions or reconciliation processes that could provide conclusion for relationships damaged by years of patriarchal control. The inheritance of Coyote Pass is being completely recomposed by new possessors, who comprehend that the genuine narrative was never about constructing a polygamous compound. It was consistently about the women who discovered the strength to select themselves over harmful household interactions, and that narrative is far from completed. Submit your considerations below about what you contemplate these puzzle purchasers are genuinely arranging. Approve, register, and remain observant because the subsequent recording is anticipating and you won't accept what's approaching subsequently.